Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wild Interviews with Fabrizio Sarde. Today, we have another awesome guest with us. It is Jim Thomas, CEO of Tenkiles Conservation Alliance in Papua New Guinea. This is an exciting interview because we will be talking about the Tenkilai. Oh, it's a very tricky pronunciation, but it sounds very exotic. So, it is a tree kangaroo species. It is a very rare animal, critically endangered according to IUCN. And today is everything about it. Today we'll talk from Jim's experiences and how he first met the species to how's the project going right now in 2021. Stay with us and learn about the Tenkale. Welcome, Jim. It is great to have you.
Hello there. Thanks for having us.
Of course, it's a big pleasure to have you. So, Jim, I think we can kickstart this interview by the simplest question of all. How did you start becoming like inspired, or how did you become, oh, I don't know how to say it, like into wildlife? How did you start like liking wildlife, or you knew that you had to work with wildlife?
Okay, well, it takes me back a while, but from a very early age, I was just fascinated with wildlife. So for me, my father, he kept tropical fish and canaries and a few other bird species. And my first ever memory of animals was catching baby king quail that had escaped from the aviary in the backyard in our suburban house in Melbourne, Australia. That's where I'm from. And catching these little fluff balls. They were tiny little babies, about 2 centimeters long, and they got out through the wire and we had to catch them. There was about 8 of them. And that was very exciting for me. And I always think of that as just how happy it made me feel to see these birds reproduce and us helping them. So I think that was my first sort of connection with wildlife and how I first wanted to help, because I was generally concerned about these birds being away from their father. Quails, males look after the young. They sit on the eggs and they raise the young. So that was my first memory. And that, I guess, progressed towards me looking after different animals as I grew up. From an age of 8, I started to look after lizards and turtles and frogs, and then that progressed into snakes and parrots and lorikeets. And from there, I, developed my studies at high school and got into biological sciences. So my university degree was science and animals and conservation. And that led to me working at the zoos, and that allowed me to expand my interest in conservation, and really fought hard to do conservation work within the zoo system and outside as a volunteer. And I did a lot of work volunteering and working with universities and doing a bit more of university myself. I went on and did honours on ringtail possums. So that was taking animals from a suburban area where there was too many of them and putting them into a rural area where the population was steady. And from there, I went on a field trip to far north Queensland, where there are 2 species of tree kangaroos. So in total, to give you a bit of a background, tree kangaroos are, yes, a kangaroo that live in trees. They've evolved and take up that niche. They've basically taken the niche of what monkeys have in many other rainforest countries. So in Australia and New Guinea, there are no monkeys. Tree kangaroos take that place. And there are 2 in Australia and 13 in New Guinea. And so I got familiar with the species in Australia, and that really made me excited to see if I could do that work in PNG. So when Professor Tim Flannery released his books in the mid-90s on tree kangaroos, and from working with the Goodfellows tree kangaroos at Melbourne Zoo as a zookeeper, that elevated my interest in the species themselves and the conservation thereof. And in 1998, there was a tree kangaroo workshop, a CPSG workshop, captive conservation planning specialist group, where all the people from zoos and universities get together and talk about different species. And when they had that meeting, they realised that the Tenkiles and Waimang tree kangaroos were in fact critically endangered, as you stated, by the IUCN, and that something needed to be done about it. And that started the Tenkiles Conservation Alliance. I was doing my honours at university at the time, but I was on the periphery, on the edge, watching what was happening and trying to get involved. And through my persistence and determination, became involved, and soon after got appointed as the leader, the project manager of the organisation. Once it was established in 2002, we were put on board, and my wife joined. Took a little bit of talking her into, leaving the comforts of Australia and to go into the remote area of Papua New Guinea, where we'd never been before, didn't speak the language, and only knew a little bit about the species.
Wow.
So that's how it all started for us, for myself, yeah.
Interesting. Wow. You started working at a zoo with other species of tree kangaroos, and then the opportunity sprawled. Like, oh, there's this species of tree kangaroos. It is critically endangered. It needs help, and we need a leader. Wow, it's incredible. I would like to inquire a little about moving to Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is like, wow, it's like a tropical place, a very different one from Australia. How did it feel to move to the Torricelli Mountains? Am I right? Or the
Yeah,
Rainforest?
Torricelli Mountain Range. Yep. Yeah, well, it was a big move for us, because coming up from Melbourne, very different climate. So we're moving from the colds of Melbourne, because Melbourne's can be quite cold, to the tropics of Papua New Guinea, which is an area very close to the equator. The length of every day is very similar, 12 hours every day, and the humidity is pretty intense. And you never have to put on a jumper or jeans. You're always in a shirt and shorts. And it took a bit of getting used to the humidity. It took us a couple of weeks before we acclimatized. And it became difficult for us when we came in and out of the country to reacclimatise to Australia and then readjust when we went back into PNG. So that was quite difficult. It was hard leaving the luxuries of our life in Australia. So, leaving a house with 24-hour power, a television, refrigerator, washing machine, hot water, all the things that we take for granted, and not having any of them in Lumi. So we came in with a solar panel on the back of the car, a battery, a few lights, and I had to use my year 12 physics to put that together. And so then we could have light and we could charge up our very small laptop computer at the time. And so that started very basic. There was no flushing toilet for us. It was a hole in the ground that we had to go, walk 50 metres from the house. And we didn't have a water tank even back then. We had to get water delivered up for us from a family down the road.
Wow.
And from there, we were like that for 2.5 years. And then slowly got money for the organisation and money for infrastructure. And now where we started is still where the organisation is based, is now about TCA-based Lumi, we call it, is now about 2 hectares fenced off with lots of permanent buildings, septic tanks, solar power, generator, internet, accommodation for over 100 people, tree kangaroos that we've kept as captives that we've rescued and bred, and a few other animals, security dogs to keep everything safe. And we have all our managers living there. So it's started from a very basic bush house with nothing, and is now the epicenter of Lumi. It's the center of a lot of activities for Lumi, including the local level government now use the facilities to hold their meetings and get resolutions. And the capacity of our staff is now, I think, fair bit greater than most of the other local level government people. And we really do lead the way and show how it can be done, and how it can be done very well. And we're proud to say, I'm very proud to say that COVID has been good for us. I'm in Australia. I haven't been back to PNG for about 18 months, year and a half, simply because I can't because of COVID. But our staff in PNG have all been trained very well by my wife especially. She's done all of the training and education of the staff. And that has meant that they're able to manage TCA, the Tenkiles Conservation Alliance, in PNG themselves. And we communicate through Messenger, meetings like this on Zoom, lots of emails, telephone calls, and it's running very well.
Now that you mentioned, that has actually been a benefit in many conservation programs in rural areas, because COVID didn't make it there in some of them, of course. And you know, it is like the work never stopped, or it stopped for a little time, but then it could be readjusted and done easily. That's actually very good to hear. And well, now that we're talking about this, I think the introduction was pretty good. Do you mind if we go over to the fun fact section and talk a little more about the Tenkale, and you know, like, what is the Tenkale?
Okay. Well, the Tenkile is the most endangered tree kangaroo. So of the 15 species, this one here has the smallest distribution and still the smallest population. It's just found in the Torricelli Mountain Range, so its distribution is about 150 square kilometres. And that means it's very at risk of threat. The biggest risk that we encountered and have addressed and have solved was human hunting. People up there, they don't have access to a lot of money. There's very little employment. And so people's backyard is like their supermarkets. They would go out and hunt whatever animals are available. Now, the Tenkile tree kangaroo can get up to 14 kilograms in weight. So it's a big animal. It's a decent sized macropod, about so big. So that's enough to feed a number of families or a small hamlet in a village. And so they're quite sought after. They were quite sought after for a meat source. And when Tim Flannery got there and described the Tenkile, so the Tenkile was unknown for the outside world until 1992. So in the late 80s, Tim Flannery was up there searching for mammals. He was doing a book, Mammals of New Guinea, and he realized that there was a new species there. And after he described it, he had done surveys in the area and put together the animal was, yep, a new species, but hanging on by a thread. Its distribution is a fraction of what it is, probably 10% of what it was through the stories he gathered from all of the villages there. So that led to the Tenkile Conservation Alliance being established. Now, the Tenkile is very unique. It's a very smart animal, from my opinion, from the ones that I've met. It's almost black in colour with some dark brown and a yellow patch on the back of its bottom and a few patches of yellow on the tail. Check our website, there's quite a few photos there. They're not like other kangaroos that live in mobs and large groups. No, the Tenkile is solitary or live in pairs. And the life history, what we're considering, what we think is right, is the male is probably has 2 or 3 females that he will service and be the sire of their young. So that's the life history, which is a polygamous history. The Waimang, on the other hand, we think are monogamous, when the males and females stay together. And this is due to the size of the animals. So a male Tenkile will be about 1/3 larger than a female Tenkile, whereas the Waimangs, the male and female are pretty much the same size, same weight. So, and the grizzled tree kangaroo, which is the other species, the vulnerable species that's found right across the Torricellis and in other areas in northern New Guinea, the male is considerably bigger than the female, you know, nearly nearly twice the size, meaning that in the wild, he would probably have 4 or 5 females within his home range that he is the father of their young. Now, the Tenkiles, when we got there, we thought there was only 100 left. Through Tim Flannery's research and from the results that we were getting. So to stop the villagers hunting, everyone signed a hunting moratorium. Do not hunt Tenkiles. This is the deal. You don't hunt this animal, we'll come in and try and do community service, education, employment. We'll try and bring something into the area. And that's what we did. So we came in with nothing. We had one small grant that was going when we started, and we started with a few projects there. But we also had enough money to go into the mountains and set up research sites. And basically, we got the villagers to work in teams, which was a real challenge in itself. Different cultures, different languages, traditional boundaries, disputes that go back, and to get villagers to work in teams of 2 and 3 took quite a while. It took me about a year to do, but we got 7 sites where the Tenkiles found, and we set that up for distance sampling. Distance sampling being back then to try and find the scats, the poo, the feces of the animal. And then from that, from the counts, the scat counts that we made, we would put that into a formula, being distance, and getting an estimate of the population. And we've done that, and we're still working on that. And the data we got indicated that the numbers were increasing, not just through the numbers of scats that people were finding, but also from the reports that we slowly got more of over the years, which showed us that people weren't hunting, the animals that were still there were breeding, and the population was slowly increasing. We believe that the population now is over 300, so it's trebled since we've been there. So still critically endangered, but in a lot better space than where they were. And the best evidence we can give is just from, was it last year or the year before? No, 2019. An animal was confirmed to be seen in a village or a village's land where they've never been seen in living history. So nobody had ever seen them there before.
Wow.
So that's a strong indication that they've moved into an area that is a village that's not part of the program. So we never thought this village had them on their land, so they weren't part of it. But now it's moved into an area where this outside village has it. And now we've got to rethink our boundaries and try and include this village in the project now, because the Tenkiles here too. Mm.
That's a great achievement, you know, and also I would like to talk a little about, if I'm correct from what I've been reading, to substitute the Tenkile as the main food source or as the main meat for the villages, you introduced a lot of farming, or chicken farming or rabbit farming, fishing, etc. How have you changed the lives of the local communities to also conserve the Tenkile and support your
well, yeah, you're right. No, that's one thing we've done to get people to change from being hunters and try and get more people to farm animals, to keep animals in captivity and eat those. So when we first got to Lumi, we travelled to all of the villages on foot, and we got to see firsthand what's happening on the ground. And every village had chickens, or free-range chickens. There were a few pigs, but nothing was housed, nothing was properly managed, really. Everything was just sort of a free-for-all. So we introduced animal husbandry, and we started with rabbits and chickens. So initially it was farming rabbits and educating and introducing a new protein source, ideally replacing the Tenkile with another mammal, being a rabbit. Now, we got those rabbits from another area in PNG, and we used rabbits because it had been successful in other areas of New Guinea, especially in West Papua. So there was still rabbit farming there, and there's rabbit farming in PNG. So we started with that and then progressed to chicken farming and fish farming. And we kept rabbit farming going for probably 8 years at our base in Lumi. And then we've handed it over to the local people. And it's still going in a number of villages. And one of our project officers, Vincent, who is dubbed the Rabbit King, he has the rabbit farm at his village, and he's been able to keep that going as a small business and keep other people interested. So there's other people will farm them from time to time, keep it going. Some will succeed, some will fail, but a lot of people will come to him to buy rabbit to eat. So it's been handed over and it's still going. It's not as successful as we had hoped, but it hasn't been a complete failure, which is good. Chickens, on the other hand, that was really difficult to implement. And the best that we've done is supply people with materials to lock their chickens up at night so that birds of prey, the native quolls in New Guinea don't get them, the village dogs don't get them, etc., etc. So that project wasn't as, because the thing with chickens is you need to bring in the stock feed from the towns to build up your chickens so that they can breed more and you have lots of chickens, and that's at a cost, and that's not something that people can just get for free around their backyard. That's what you can do with rabbits. They just eat greens. You can give them a lump of grass if you really want to, and that's just next to the house. Don't have to pay anything, no real effort. And that was the same with fish farming as well. So fish farming has been done in the villages since before we started, and we've helped people with their fish ponds. So we've noticed that when you have a fish pond that's made from cement, it keeps the water in longer, so there's no breaks in the pond through the land, falling away and fish dying through all the water running out. So it keeps all your fish in the one place always, and it also increases the number of eggs that hatch. When the eggs are attached to the cement, the hard walls, they've got a better chance of hatching out than they do when they're attached to the soil that's loose that could cover them up and kill them. So that's what we've done, and continue to support. So we continue to support Vincent in getting new equipment. He's got a very good setup now for rabbits. Chickens, we've handed over back to the local people. We've done as much as we can. Fish farming, we're still supporting there. So the fish ponds have been very popular and quite successful. So if we can, we'll get more funding for that. And that's really how we've addressed the aspect you just brought up of alternative protein for the people. We are looking at more different cash crops as well to supplement people's diet to try and get more protein in through that road as well. But getting telling a Papua New Guinean that there's protein in mushrooms and protein in seeds, we need to do a bit more education, because protein is considered in animals. In PNG, you say protein in arbus tasol. So a bit of work to do there as well.
I imagine, but everything you have done to introduce new meats or new food proteins to the population, that's a great initiative. Also, fun fact about Papua New Guinea: it is one of the countries with the most different ethnic groups in the world. Well, as Jim mentioned, each of these different tribes, some of them might not even be from the same ethnicity. They may have different languages, different costumes. It's incredible. Also, if I'm correct, Jim, the Torricelli Mountain Range, it is located to the northwestern part of Papua, right? Is
Papua
it
New Guinea, yeah.
the frontier of Indonesia, Papua, Indonesia, or is it more to the Papua side?
So the Torricellis is, yes, in northwest Papua New Guinea. We're not too far from the Indonesian border, being West Papua. So we've been across through Jayapura a few times when we've gone to different conferences. Very different, politically extremely different. So it's all run by Indonesia, and PNG is an independent country. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Jim, I think we can move on to the threats and conservation section. Now that you have, well, not entirely, but in majority, stopped hunting in the region, what are the remaining threats for the conservation of the Tenkiles?
Logging at the moment, it's industrial logging. So that combined with oil palm and of course population increase is our biggest threats on the Torricelli Mountain Range, which holds the Tenkiles and Waimang tree kangaroos, also the grizzled tree kangaroo. Lots of biodiversity there. So it's such an important place to try and save because it holds about 40% of Papua New Guinea's mammals,
Wow.
over 50% of its birds, and up to 60% of its reptiles and frogs. So it's really an incredible place. Unfortunately, there are logging concessions all around, and they target the areas that are flatter because it's easy to take the trees from flat land and mountainous land. But at the moment, we're up against a road that's been trying to be pushed through the middle, and that's what we're working with our staff on the ground and trying to get government and others to, see what is happening is not right, because there has not been any free, prior, informed consent to the landowners or communities. They've just been told, here's a road, we're forcing it through. If you get in the way, we'll beat you up. Is basically the message that's been conveyed by the police. And we're fighting that as much as we can. So we're getting the story out there. Hopefully it'll be on the internet soon. And we've certainly let everyone know, our board, our staff, all of our partners. The European Union has been good. They've produced some maps that have shown where the damage is occurring and when. And now we're trying to improve our surveys on the ground to have a better handle of what's happening and when, and immediate threats, so we can alert the authorities to try and act. We have alerted the authorities. Unfortunately, they haven't acted yet. We're hoping they will, because you've got a lot of upset landowners thinking that a road's going through their area and they haven't been told about it. They haven't been involved in the whole process. So that's our biggest challenge at the moment. And we're working very hard to keep going.
Of course, but this gives hope to the people, because when you have to stop the main threat and then you just gotta stop the lesser ones, that if you don't like having the outreach program, the education programs, if it decreases them to the point where they don't become the major threat, you can really feel that you are doing something and that this species is having hope of not going extinct. And that's great. That's something conservationists see every day. Well, at least in not all species or in all countries.
It's good to hear your optimism. Very good to hear more optimism. I think I need a bit more of it at the moment. Thank you.
Oh, Jim. Well, everybody needs optimism right now with everything going on out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, Jim, now that we talked about the threats, oh my God, this interview has been, like pretty straightforward, pretty good. A lot of information has been provided. I don't know. What is something you think that we should discuss before we end today's interview?
I'd like to think we should emphasize the importance of tropical rainforests, because here I am in far north Queensland, tropical rainforests. I'm trying to save tropical rainforest in New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. You're in Panama. You're also in an area where there's tropical rainforests, and they're both being hammered. I don't know the full story in your part of the world, but they're both being hammered by logging. I think the world now needs a moratorium on rainforest logging. Logging in general would be better, but rainforest logging needs to stop. And we've only got 1/7 of the tropical rainforest that we once had. And, not that long ago, it was only 70 or 80 years ago that it was, close to 80, 90%, close to 90%. And yet that 1/7 is producing up to 40% of the world's oxygen. They're sort of the numbers, the figures I have. A significant amount of our air that we breathe every day is because of the tropical rainforests that are still there. And I think that's the topic we should have a bit of a chat on, if you like, in finishing up.
Indeed. Well, the main problems here of the rainforest are basically logging and mining. Mining is becoming a huge issue. I'm really glad that in the Torricelli Mountain Range it is not a direct threat to the Tenkiles, because mining can destroy everything, and something that the mining destroys in most cases cannot be saved back or cannot be restored back. The case, for example, well, in some cases there can be a balance, like for example in the chinchillas case in Chile. They are educating and the community is actually involving, and if they see a chinchilla in a mining site, they will do everything to protect them or to make it a safer space. So yes, in several cases I really do think that we should also emphasize the protection of the rainforest and of the other species that inhabit them. Because, okay, maybe we're talking about the three kangaroos, but in the case of Papua New Guinea, what about the birds of paradise? What about the reptile, geckos, the amphibians? Everything keeps the rainforest healthy. If one species goes extinct, all of the rainforest could go extinct. Yes, Jim. Is that right? Well,
It certainly is. It certainly is. And that's one thing you never know. Say, oh, look, it's just one species. What if it go extinct? But they're all part of the web of life. And you take one out, it's going to take a while, and it may not happen for the rainforest to recover. And certainly, you can give lots of examples where other animals have come in and affected the survival of species and changed the dynamic. And you change that dynamic too much, the whole system will collapse. And what's special about the Torricellis is the system there is pretty much primary tropical rainforest. There's very few invasive species. There's a few pigs, but not in very big numbers. We haven't recorded feral cats yet in the Torricellis on our camera traps, which is astounding. Everyone I tell and show, they say, well, that's a good result. And yeah, I mean, if the tenkale was to die out, it could mean a big difference in the rainforest, because they fruit and seeds, they disperse those through their feces. Cassowaries, of course, are very important. They're another highly prized species in the Torricellis. The big ostrich-like bird with the helmet on its head and very coloured face. There's two species of them in the Torricellis, and they're recovering as well. People are seeing more cassowaries now, and closer to the villages too.
wow.
So yeah, you're right. You take something out, the whole system could collapse, and there's many instances where it has. Great example is it's a good example of the Yellowstone National Park, where they put wolves back in. Have you seen that story? How the ecosystem was before wolves came in? It was dilapidated in many spots. The wolves came in, they drove all of the deer and elk back into the woods so they didn't wreck up the banks of the rivers. That recovered, then other species came in, and it just went back to the natural state. Yeah.
The first thing that I remember about that article, well, it was like how wolves are changing the course of rivers in Yellowstone National Park. All of this did such a great impact on the ecosystem that practically it restored a big part of it. And yes, like Jim said, we remove one species, everything can fall out or can be lost. Before we end today's interview, Jim, what can you tell me about your rescued Tenkiles? If I'm correct, there are currently non-Tenkiles in captivity.
That's right. No Tenkile in captivity. I've only seen a handful in the flesh. I've seen lots on camera trap, lots of reports from our villagers. But the people there they don't want to see it in captivity. So we respect that.
No, but you mentioned you had some unreleasable
Oh,
individuals. I imagine they are from other species.
correct. So we do have 2 Waimang tree kangaroos, and we presently have 7 grizzled tree kangaroos. So they're ones there where the mothers have died and the young have been raised by the people, and then we've taken them in. So in the case of the Tenkile, nobody's ever caught one and said, here's one for you to look after, here's one, we're proving it there. The people were very protective. So slightly different culture. Whereas in the Waimang, when we first started, we were just looking after the Tenkile. We hadn't started with the Waimang yet. And so we had a couple produced to us saying, yes, we have Waimang, here they are, put us in the program. So that's how we got those animals. And we've kept them and we've bred them, and that's now their young are surviving. And the grizzled are the same as well. They've got a wider distribution, and we've had them come into us as young, and then we've looked after the young. As zookeepers, we feel obliged to look after these animals, give them the best life that we can. And they've proved very good in terms of education. So if people want to see tree kangaroos, they don't know what one is. And many Papua New Guineans haven't seen tree kangaroos because they are elusive, they are rare. So you don't see them in the wild like you do in a... And so people will come to our base in Lumi, and our staff will give them a bit of a lesson on tree kangaroos. Yeah.
So basically, as the Tenkiles were raider, people, had like that sense of protection towards them more than what they have to the grizzled tree kangaroo or the wild man's tree kangaroo.
Yeah, it appears that way. Yeah, there's a very strong cultural bond to the Tenkile. A lot of traditional stories come from the Tenkile and all of those villages. And that's less so with the Waimang. And with the grizzled tree kangaroo, that's got a very wide distribution. So it's not specific to one area.
Oh,
so it's more general.
Jim, it's time. What's your last inspiring message for my viewers?
Inspiring message for your viewers. I'll hope if you found everything inspiring. It's still inspiring doing this work. It's worth pursuing conservation, and I would encourage all of your viewers to do as much conservation as you can. Never think nothing. A little is nothing. Something can build to something else, and who knows? It'd be great to see some of you do what my wife and I have been doing in Papua New Guinea, because we need more conservationists on the ground to help save the rainforests of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that message, Jim. What a great way to end today's interview. Thanks to all of you for watching, and please subscribe and like. We need to reach as much people as we can and highlight the work that Jim and countless other conservationists do to save our world's endangered animals. Please go follow Tenkile Conservation Alliance. I will link you down below their social media, and you can stay updated with everything they are doing right now in Papua New Guinea. Jim, it was great to have you. Thank you for your time. And I hope that in the future we can do more things together to raise awareness about the Tenkile.
Great. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.